Hi, I'm Kristen and this is Scrap Fabric Love, and today I'm going to tell you the story of how I made my dress quilt. That's what I'm going to call it. It's not the name I've given to the quilt. I called it Wasted on the Young, but basically it's a quilt with a great big dress on the front. You can see a bit of it here. I'll show you a better picture as we go through the video, but you might have seen it already if you saw my video last week about the Festival of Quilts in Birmingham, England. So that's a quilt show in the UK that I've gone to for the last 3 years and submitted quilts to for the last 3 years, despite having said several years ago I'd never enter a quilt in a quilt show. But anyways, and this show is kind of my license to get a bit arty. That's what I kind of seem to use it for. So I make some slightly more bonkers quilts when I go to submit for the Festival of Quilts. I explained more in the video from last week, but basically this particular quilt show accepts any entries. It's not juried. And when you go there, you just see such a mix of different quilts and different techniques and approaches that you do just get this kind of feeling that anything goes. And I like to enter the sustainable category, which is a category that was new from the last 3 years. So I basically entered the first year they had it, and I have done ever since. And that's all about using, reclaimed, recycled materials and also like biodegradable, sustainable materials that way as well. So I use the sustainable part as the kind of jumping off point generally. And that's what I did this year. So I started trying to find materials that were reclaimed, that could be repurposed in a way different to what they were previously, and make a quilt out of that.
So first off, I thrifted this white cotton tablecloth and this curtain lining. I'll show it to you closer up, but this was from my local thrift shop as well. And I also used a secondhand sheet as the backing. It's gray. You can just about see it on the long arm there. And I started by just doing some straight line quilting all across the tablecloth in one direction. And then I took it off the frame, reloaded it, and did straight lines in the opposite direction to make a kind of random tartan plaid kind of crosshatch, whatever you want to, not a crosshatch because it's not diagonal, but that sort of idea. So the lines are going in two directions across the tablecloth. At this point, I did not actually have a plan for what was going to go on top of the tablecloth, and my cat thought I had just made her a lovely nap spot. It was this point in the midst of selling some of my old clothes on a secondhand site here in the UK that I had the idea of using this dress for my quilt this year.
All right, so this is the dress. Fit me in my 20s. Wore it to a couple weddings. Had lots of fun in it. Never going to fit me again. But I guess the basic idea of using this for my quilt is I can remember feeling good in it, but I can also remember feeling very angsty about a lot of things, very anxious, very worried about some things that, maybe never happened or maybe did happen. Also full of all sorts of dreams and hopes and plans and all of that, and just all this craziness that's in your head when you're that age and you spend all your time, or I did, kind of worked up and trying for all sorts of things and maybe not always enjoying things in the moment. Sometimes I did, but anyway. So it's a sort of a vague, slightly arty idea, but I'm going to cut the back off of this dress, and I'm going to do it slightly in from this seam so that I can use this, not kind of as a seam allowance, but it's going to be appliqued on, but so that you can kind of see the front and you don't sort of lose that shape. There's some boning in this. I'm going to keep that in here. And then I've got some other ideas for what's going to happen up here and down here. Just trust me. Well, I have to trust myself because obviously I don't know how it's going to turn out yet. Okay, let's cut it off.
So I cut the whole back of the dress off, as I said, leaving a little bit extra beyond those side seams so that I could just fold that under and not have like raw edges. And I also cut out the lining of the dress just to save on bulk because I didn't want to be sewing through lots and lots of layers of fabric when I attached this dress to the tablecloth. And this is what it looked like front and back once it was all cut up. And then I essentially laid it on top of that tablecloth, used some matching thread, and started stitching. Okay, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but I have stitched so the waistband on and a little bit of the bodice up here. And then I've rolled it up to start advancing and do the skirt, or most of it. I'm going to leave the very edge loose, and I've left the very top of the bodice loose so I can tuck sort of flowers in and things. That's the kind of idea. Anyway, fabric flowers. So you'll see. Anyway, but what I'm looking at right now is that this, so I'm going to have the skirt kind of splayed out like this, but there's 2 layers to it. So if you lift this up, there's this whole other bit of it, right? But you're not really going to see that. So what I've done is kind of lay it out. I'm gonna have to do it again, but anyway, lay it out to kind of make it the way I want it. And then I put a clip down here where you kind of, so it's like, this is gonna hang over here. Let me show you. And I want to have that overlap, but then I don't need the fabric that's kind of beyond that clip on here, so that I can cut that away and have less bulk to sew under. And I can use that fabric for some other project some other time. So anyway, that is my next step, is to cut away that excess fabric under there. So once that was all cut away and kind of reducing the bulk there, it was back to stitching. So I don't know if you can see, but like on this dress, there's it's kind of a silky feel material, but it's probably polyester. I didn't actually check the label before I cut it up. Anyway, and then it's got these more like, I guess, embroidered sort of, machine embroidered sort of flowers on it. So I decided to stitch around those flowers and leave the kind of silky bit unquilted. So it kind of, the quilting and the applique quilting, I guess it's quilting, that attaches the dress to the tablecloth is all done around these flowers. So it just looks like the dress is quilted. Obviously, there was some bulky bits. I just kind of folded the dress where it would fold if you were hanging it and tried to stitch it down there. So not every fold is completely stitched down, but the dress is pretty good and secure on there. For anyone who's wondering, my long arm is a Moxie, Handy Quilter Moxie. It's the kind of entry-level one. It's not even the XL. But it handled it fine. Don't have the computerized Pro Stitcher, so it's just all done freehand. So I've taken this off the long arm and put it on the floor, my messy floor. It's not going to be as long as this. I'm going to cut some of this off at the bottom. I'll lose some of this length at the bottom of the quilt, but it'll be pretty much this wide and probably about that high, maybe a little less. Might cut off a bit at the top. But as you can maybe see, this is mostly stitched down, kind of around the flowers, but not at the very bottom. It's flipped so that I can kind of put some things underneath and then stitch them down there. And same here, so the very top is not yet stitched down. The rest of it is, there's a few areas, I don't know if I can see them on here, can't really, where I wasn't totally happy with the tension that I might change if I have time, but if I don't, I don't. So anyway, that's what it's looking like right now, pretty plain. And I needed to take it off so that I could sort of place what I want in different places and see where I want things before I put it back on the long arm to stitch those down. The basic idea was to have kind of flowers, leaves, petals, stuff like that, spilling out from the bottom and top of the dress. So I was just sort of cutting shapes out. Some of them were from old sheets. Some of them were from jeans. Some of them were from other people's patchwork that I'd bought. And a few were from some material that I got from Christine, who, if you follow the channel, I made a quilt for a month or so ago. And she had a little bit of flowery fabric in her bundle. So I used some of that in this quilt as well. So I was just creating kind of this shoebox of shapes and then playing with where they would all go. And the idea is that these flowers and petals that are coming out of the dress are that sort of the angst, the hopes, the dreams, the, you know, all the youthful kind of busy energy that I was talking about at the beginning. This kind of idea of a brain spilling over, I guess, is a bit of a recurring theme for me because it looks a little bit similar to my first Sustainable Quilt entry, Overgrown, which I'll put a picture of up on the screen. Anyway, here I am removing the basting stitches and the templates from someone else's EPP Dresden plate that I purchased goodness knows where. It's probably in one of my video hauls. And all I'm doing is once I'm happy with where things were placed, I was either ironing it down with fusible, if it was something I had a fusible on the back of, because I was using some scraps that already had fusible on to cut these shapes out of, or I was just using like a basting kind of glue, like underneath that patchwork, and just ironing it down. So I was just playing around with where things were, and when I was like, yep, that looks good, then I was ironing it down. So these flowers that are falling, the purple and the blue, those are some of the ones from Christine's fabric. And there's a few other bits in different places of the quilt as well. This bit of the process is the most fun for me, just trying to decide where everything is going to go and having it become this sort of very weird jigsaw that I'm putting together.
All right, so this is where I've got to so far. I've pretty much either glued or fused down most of these bits. And the idea now is that I'm going to go and put it back on the long arm and try and attach all of that. And then I might have to take it off again to figure out what's going to go at the bottom and maybe add more. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see how it goes.
So essentially what I was doing with the quilting here is appliquing these pieces down. So I changed my thread color a lot. I used, greens on the greens, blue on the blue, whatever the closest match I had to whatever I was stitching down. And it was basically raw edge applique, except that some of the pieces, like the patchwork and the dress, didn't have raw edges. The edges were turned under. But for everything else, it was raw edge. So it was just going sort of as close to the edge as was safe to keep it attached. I often went around some of the shapes more than once, and in a few places I used rulers. Yes, I know that's not the proper ruler foot. I couldn't be bothered to change it for just this little bit. So that's kind of how I roll.
So this is kind of where I got to. The dress is all stitched on the top. This bit's still loose at the bottom. That's all stitched. And I've taken it off the long arm so that I can then find what I want to go down here. I could have done it, I suppose, on the long arm, but I think it would be hard for me to see how it goes with everything else if it's not on the floor. So I'm just going to load, reload, all of that. So I'm going to lay everything out here, kind of glue it down or pin it or whatever, and then put it back on the long arm and then stitch that. So that is the plan. I better get on with it because it is 4th of June. Deadline's the 11th. So yeah, I need to do this bit now. Okay.
So I went back to my shoebox of bits and pieces that I'd collected earlier and started the process of kind of creating this spillage of flowers, petals, whatever, from the bottom as well as the top of the dress. But this time, because the top was all finished, I had some kind of ideas, motifs, shapes, whatever you want to call them, that I wanted to kind of echo or repeat in a sort of a way on the bottom. So I was just sort of playing around, seeing what worked, but it wasn't like anything dramatically different on the bottom than what was on the top. It was just using some different shapes and different pieces to do something that sort of chimed with what was already there. And all of this was obviously led by what I had. So the sheets or duvet covers or bits and pieces, fabric samples. I used velvet remnants. I used some, not sequin, but like spandexy material. So just whatever I had was what kind of dictated what all these shapes and flowers were going to look like. And obviously I used similar ones in the top, in the bottom, and that's how they ended up kind of matching or strokes, speaking to each other, whatever you want to say about that. But again, this part, lots of fun. And as you can see, I've got my headphones on, listening to some kind of podcast and just off in my happy place. And of course, this whole process was very messy. And this is the project right before I redid my sewing room, if you've seen that video from a while back. So this mess is no longer there. And just like with the top, I loaded it back on the long arm and stitched everything down. So here it is. I've just taken it off of the long arm. I need to decide now kind of what shape it's going to be. Like trim, obviously I don't need all this at the bottom. I don't know if I want to make it kind of wavy at the sides or what I want to do. So I got to figure that bit out next. So the idea I'd had in my head when I came up with this idea was that it would be an irregularly shaped quilt, similar to the overgrown quilt. I actually really liked it as a rectangle, so I was of two minds. I did, in the end, start cutting it, and then I had a wobble. So I cut out some curves And then I had a pretty major freak out and decided it was better before I cut it, which obviously not much I could do about that now. So I did ask inside Scrap Club for advice. Folk were saying I should add some white over here, which I absolutely can see I should, but and I do have the offcuts. I suppose I could zigzag or hand stitch, but you would absolutely see the join, and I'm just not sure that it would look right. So now what I'm considering is adding a few more bits going off this way. These two are not attached, and maybe something up the top so that it doesn't look so strange that this stuff is all squished and coming off the side, So that's where I'm going with that now, and maybe curving something a bit more there. Yeah, but I kind of wish at this point I hadn't cut it. Some other folk in my scrap club also said, since I've cut it, I should cut it more. And I also had some friends and my stepfather who said they liked it better curvy. They might have just been making me feel better. But anyway, I made peace with it. So although I thought I'd made the wrong choice cutting it, by the time it ended up in the show, I was fine with it. It's funny how these things that feel like big dramas at the time are just not important like a month later. So anyway, these are some close-ups. And then I sent it off and it was hung in the Festival of Quilts in the Sustainable Category. So here it is hanging, and that is the little tag. And then here is me smiling cheesily in front of it. And here is the feedback from the judges. I shared this last time, and so I thought you guys might like to see it this time. So there's a few judges, and there's various categories. So like overall design, quilting design, density and consistency. So that's about even and balanced, no puckers. I mean, I had some puckers that were there on purpose, so I don't know. Anyway, stitch quality needs attention from this judge. No big surprise. This judge maybe didn't love it, but that's all right. This one I had mostly good. And there's another one. Hang on. And then this one, it's a slightly different sheet, so I don't know if it's the same judge or with a different sheet. I don't know. Good, satisfactory. So kind of a range of those. And then is there something in here? It comes in a bunch of envelopes when you get it back, and I don't really understand why. I guess it's different judges or something. These I'll say good, and one person said overall design was excellent. So I'll take that and try not to get stressed about the rest. I mean, as I've said before, I don't enter these quilts to win. I kind of enter them for the creative challenge mostly, and also just to be part of such an amazing show with so many amazing quilts showing and just walking around and feeling like you're part of it because you've contributed one and it's hanging there. So I really enjoyed making this quilt and just the creative process of basically placing all of this madness up the top and the bottom. The Festival of Quilts, so the show that I hung this in this year, this particular year that I went, I mean, every year it's inspiring, but this particular year, something kind of clicked in my brain that said, you can make whatever you want. So while I still love making bed quilts and cuddly quilts, and most of my quilts get cuddled with and snuggled with, and I have about 8 on my bed, no joke. But I really enjoyed this process. I enjoyed seeing all the mini quilts. So I think I'm gonna do more art quilts. It's a term I've got a bit of an issue with. I don't feel comfortable calling myself an art quilter or anything like that. I'm trying to get better at just not worrying about labels because they don't really matter that much. If you've watched the channel before, I call myself a confident beginner. I mean that for quilting, I mean that for everything. And what it really means is that I'm willing to take a chance and embrace new things, even if they're a bit scary and I think maybe I don't know what I'm doing. So in the spirit of that, what I am going to do, which I've never done before, is I'm going to put some of my quilts up for sale. People probably tell you this as well. When you make a quilt, people come up and go, "Oh, you should sell those." And I'm like, no, that makes no sense. The amount of time and whatever that it takes, no one's going to want to pay that. And probably they're not. That's fine. But I'll never know if I don't put it up. And honestly, I don't have space for all the quilts that I'm making, and I don't want to stop making them. So I am going to put the ones that I've made for the Festival of Quilts in the Sustainable Category up on my Etsy shop and on my website if anyone wants to buy them and have them in their home.
They are meant as wall quilts, essentially, except for one, which could be either. You could use it as a bed quilt or a wall quilt. But anyway, I don't know how to price these things, but I've put a price on it where I wouldn't feel sad to let it go, because I would know the person who was buying it probably valued it as much or more than I do. So that's the idea. And I might also put some smaller wall hanging style quilts that I've been working on there when I get the chance. So I know most of you who follow the channel, you make your own quilts, you don't need to buy mine. But if you know anybody who likes quilted wall art, that kind of thing, and you think they might be interested, feel free to share the link with them. That'd be great. But if they don't sell, they don't sell. It's an experiment, that's fine. All the links are in the video description for that, if anyone's interested. So thanks so much for listening to the journey of how I made this quilt. If you've not subscribed and you like scrappy, no rules quilting, that's mostly what you see on this channel, I'd love it if you'd consider subscribing. If you are looking for your quilty people, I also have Scrap Club, which is an online quilt guild, essentially. We're not a guild, quilt group, but that's essentially how it works. We do group quilts, we do mini quilt swaps, we've got chat groups so you can chat in and share your work anytime. And then we've got a monthly Zoom meeting on the last Sunday of the month, where there's loads and loads of show and tell and then some chat near the end. And we are working on setting up some regional sit and sews as well. So folk in different time zones can just sit and sew whatever they want and have a natter and get to know each other. So lots going on at Scrap Club if you're interested. And we're going to be starting our next quilt along end of August, and if you're in Scrap Club, you get all of the patterns for that free. So if that sounds like something you might be into, go ahead and check that link in the video description box as well. So that's it for me this week. Thanks so much for spending time with me, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.